My guest is a longtime friend of mine from Minnesota. He's a slackliner and member of the nonprofit group Slackline Minnesota. I'm excited to welcome Mark Mckee.
Excited to be on the show, Adam Tiller.
Hey man,
It's
how
a
you
pleasure and
doing?
an honor. Doing well.
It's been so long. I don't remember the last time that I even fucking saw you. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it has been a real long time. I think the bulk of our communication has been in upholding our Thanksgiving tradition where we used to meet every Thanksgiving evening and do this or that. And pretty much these days it's a text, but that's awesome too, to keep the tradition going. But
This tradition that
staying
you're
in
talking about, I didn't even know that it existed. Just every evening on Thanksgiving, you would call me. And I would be like,
families are done.
why are you calling me on Thanksgiving? And then we would end up hanging out.
We'd be hanging out, but no, it started in high school, and we'd usually get together and get into some shenanigans on
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Day.
But it was always you instigating. It was so funny to me. Like I would just why did you pick me of all of your friends to reach out to?
Well, see, that's how traditions start, and then it became one. So I was successful in that, and it'll lapse over the years, but
You
keep it going on some level. And then when we find ourselves in the same city, we'll just blow it, blow it up. You
for
know what I
sure.
mean?
Well, you need a certain family environment too, where like on the night of Thanksgiving, where like after everybody's eaten, nobody wants to do anything with one another.
It's like I'm ready to keep going.
Exactly.
Better call Adam.
Exactly. So
Keep
funny.
hanging.
Well, before we get into stuff, I do just want to say if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like on this video, and the notifications bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. Um, Mark and I went to high school together. We have known each other fucking since I don't know, maybe sixth grade. I want to say,
I think that's it, man. Middle school brought us together,
yeah.
and
But we hung
yeah,
out.
long time.
We hung out when I.
More in high school. We were a little together, a little bit music stuff.
hmm Yeah, maybe like ninth
Yeah.
grade or whatever. But since college, like, I mean, we went our separate ways. Like, what did you end up doing that kind of led you to like this slackline stuff?
Great, man. That's that would encompass a very broad window of time. But I went to school.
Yeah,
I graduated eventually. I studied political science and history. I worked at the Capitol, the state capitol here for a while in politics, kind of as most people do. Figured out working in the field that you study directly, especially if it's like one of those CLA majors. It'll either work or you might want to explore other avenues. So since then, I worked for small construction companies. I worked in the railroad environment for a large contractor for a number of years, and have bounced around careers a lot, but it's always worked out. I've always made a good income, and whatever income I'm doing, working for over the last long while has kind of catered towards slackline activities. And so slacklining is something that I picked up kind of as I was getting out of school, is when the sport became increasingly popular. That was probably around 2010. Slacklining in the exact same way as you would see, as most people are introduced to slacklining, on like a small line between two trees not far apart at all, maybe 20 feet, either in a park or in a yard.
that's a
Um,
rodeo line, right?
yeah, no, really, even 20 feet long, you can pull it tight and walk it like a foot off the ground. That would be like your beginner line.
hmm
And the real common ones you'll see are 2 inches wide that have a ratchet tie down strap, just like a hay strap or
Like
what
a
you use to
moving
strap down.
strap or whatever.
Totally. So that's like the mass market slackline kit. And the reason they they'll tension with that ratchet system is because it's pretty simple to figure out.
Hmm.
And so that's how a lot of people still get started. That's exactly how I started. And then throughout the journey, I was fortunate enough to encounter, first by chance, encounter people that were into uh, just the slackline discipline a little bit deeper, and so they showed me methods and equipment to expand your slackline journey. And people say like, oh, okay, you like, and the reason I say expand the slackline journey as opposed to simply rig longer lines, you learn to utilize like different types of equipment to rig any type of line you want. So it could be longer, it could be tighter. The material could change drastically. You could use stretchy stuff, low stretch stuff. As you get a grasp of how to use a lot of that equipment, once you're real proficient, you know, you kind of start to develop a confidence rigging the same stuff at heights with a couple additional steps, stuff like that.
Yeah, and you sent me a
So
couple videos of you doing this. So like anyone listening that doesn't have an understanding of slacklining, I asked the producer to throw some like just those clips in here to get a sense of what that looks like. You showed me some pictures, but it's initially when I saw it, it's like tight roping. Like that's what it looks like
completely.
initially. So if you had two buildings that in like the whole like circus type, you know, can this guy cross setup? But there's so many different iterations of this in what you're doing. Like there's all these like the actual material can change, and it's wide too, right? Like it's not a super narrow. I mean, aren't there like more tightrope style slack lines? But then there's also like these different materials that change the
Yeah,
dynamics.
completely. So a tightrope is, it would be like a different sport, different category. It's totally awesome. But tightropes are typically like a steel cable, twisted steel cable, heavier. And slacklining, you know, the origins of the sport, basically 1 inch nylon tubular webbing is your standard material that people will use to build anchors, rock climbing anchors. And they said, let's just see how much tension we can get on this strap basically between two trees and see if we can walk on it. And so that webbing has a lot of play. Nylon stretches side to side, up and down. And so those were kind of the origins of the sport. It is distinct from tight roping. But when you see them, you know, at first glance, there are a lot of similarities. What I tell people is tight roping, the line, there's a lot of weight in the line as it's suspended between the 2 points. And so your foot, you're not going to manipulate the positioning of that tightrope all that much based on your own weight. And so you use a pole as your counterbalance,
Okay.
as your counterweight. And so if you're leaning a little too far this way, bring the pole like this, whatever. The slackline material, which is typically 1 inch wide, the two most common materials are polyester or nylon. Nylon is going to be stretchier. Polyester is going to be lower stretch. And then the rest of the characteristics are determined by the weave of the strap, essentially. So you can go real deep into different weave patterns and how a webbing is woven. We don't necessarily need to do that, but how the webbings are constructed really determines how they're going to behave under tension.
Okay.
Uh, and so there are many other materials that slacklines are made out of beyond nylon and polyester, but you're playing with the dynamics. And so you have the dynamics of the material, which includes the stretch and just the weight of it, and then the length of your line. If you have more material out there, it's going to be more material to stretch. So that gets really interesting. And then the amount of tension you put on the line before you start walking it makes it interesting too. But to get back to like the clear distinction between tightrope walking and slacklining, tightrope walkers use the pole a lot for their counterbalance. The slackline has so much play laterally and then stretch up and down that your counterbalance comes entirely from how you manipulate your body and foot positioning in relation to the slackline. So you can move it underneath you, you can throw a little bounce into it just to steal some energy from the line if it starts wobbling like this. You can just give it a little push and that'll kind of take some of that wobbly energy and turn it into an energy, a bounce. But yeah, that's the difference between slacklining and tightrope walking. Recently, I maybe within the actually, I can't really say this for sure, but the slackline length record has now far surpassed the longest tightrope ever walked. Don't ask for the specifics there, but I know that it has, which is cool. Just got to make that point.
Did
Um,
did your just side question, but like you grew up skateboarding, how much like crossover has there been from that to like cuz you've always been like you've had crazy balance snowboarding, skateboarding. Does that help quite a bit with this?
I'm sure. I'm sure. In slacklining, yeah, for me it was skateboarding, snowboarding. I loved wakeboarding a little bit. Stuff, yeah, kind of the board foot oriented sports I loved. Um, so huge crossover, and that definitely helped. And it was probably one of the reasons that I enjoyed the sport so much. Other great slackliners, they come from like a speed skating background, which makes perfect sense.
Like
You
longboarding
know,
and shit.
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
longboarding
gotcha. Like
and
skate,
the
skate.
as when you think about, because slacklining is a pretty new sport and people that come to it are often coming from at least a background in something else. And so to compare, not necessarily what you did before and what you do now, because many people, like I still go snowboarding and enjoy that and slackline and whatnot. But what makes slacklining so unique is that it does fall into the category of like extreme sport in terms of the height you can achieve and really like the focus that's required and the determination in terms of needing to have lots of practice to be ready to approach a line that is really cool, like what you saw in some of these pictures. The thing that I find so appealing about slacklining that has really grabbed me is like the safety component, like snowboarding, skateboarding. It scratches that like that kind of like exposure adrenaline itch. Going real fast on a skateboard, hitting a big kicker, weaving through trees, uh, going down the mountain, whatever. With slacklining, it can get real intense, but as long as the rigging is always good and you follow a fairly straightforward set of safety practices, it's a sport without many consequences, no matter how intense it gets.
Hmm.
And so, like, say you're like having fun hitting like a 60-foot kicker on a snowboard, and maybe you throw a big fat one, and then maybe you're ready to go for a 360, and then it's like as you dial it up, the possibility to slam there or for something to happen that just kind of ruins your day is always there. With slacklining, sure, little minor injuries can occur, but the highline rig is so overblown. At least it should be strong, and we can talk about how we've kind of with the nonprofit tried to communicate and teach standard safe rigging practices and stuff like that. But with just the um, how you can progress in the sport and minimize the possibility of really anything dangerous happening to you or any safety risk, and then that's in contrast to how just the magnitude of what you can set up in terms of some of these lines looking like holy shit. Like on a snowboard, you're riding hard. Same with mountain biking. Like you push it, you did some wild stuff in that day. And maybe you took some risks. Slacklining, I mean, one of the last lines we rigged up, one of the last big ones anyway, was like just shy of 1,500 feet long, between the two anchors, and then in the middle, you're 600 feet off the ground, just balancing on this narrow strap. And to be able to do that, like your brain is screaming, like all of this positioning is not what is I'm supposed to be. This is not suited for survival,
Yeah.
the position you're in right now. But if you're able to know that you set this rig up, it's redundant, everything is really safe, and you can kind of keep that confidence at the forefront that, like, yes, this is scary, but it is okay for me to be doing this. Because
What's going on internally at that moment?
when you get into highlining and when you start to approach these lines, it's absolute body freak out panic mode.
Just
You're
adrenaline?
well, yes, when you're learning and when you're first getting acclimated, or when you take the next step and get on something really scary, like that much higher, that much longer, you're like your like primal reactive reactions are coming into place. So my hands used to go numb, and then like when you're staring down this super long line trying to like get collected to stand up and see if you can take one step, like I used to have like the straight up tunnel vision, just closing, like so disoriented because of everything that's happening. You're just like, and you just fall off. And so obviously but the leash catches you, it's only 4 feet long, so you're like, oh god, oh thank you, okay, I'll get back up and try again.
When
Once
that
you
happens, like once you've fallen, does it loosen you up a little bit?
Totally, totally, yep. When you're kind of getting familiar with a scary line, we'll say just like get the whip out of the way, because you'll go out there, you'll sit and you'll be waiting to stand for like a long time maybe.
Yeah.
It's like just get it over with, stand up, fall, let the leash catch you, remantle the line, stand back up, and then you might be ready to go. Just to finish up on that thought though, with the high lines, like you'll always get a little bit of heebie jeebies right when you set something up and it's new and it's scary. But by and large, going out onto those lines now, as long as we're following the practices, the safety and rigging practices, you are rigging with people that you trust, that you know are not going to skip a step. If they're unsure about anything, they get a second set eyes, all that good stuff. um, that like primal fear response for most people will eventually just completely shut off. It's just not you've conditioned your brain to not react that way anymore.
Hmm.
And so the result there is that you can hit these lines with like killer exposure, and then you're walking a distance, that line that I just referenced previously, that took just shy of like 40 minutes to walk across. So you're on a journey, just traveling through the air over this canyon and experiencing the atmosphere. So like if a breeze comes through, hopefully it's not too gusty and pushes you too fast where you fall over. But if a breeze comes through, it'll move you 5 feet, sometimes more, just to the left and then back.
So it's
And
it's
that's
a
like
like active like environment that's constantly kind of changing.
totally. So there's a lot to enjoy and explore and learn, and it's dope, is basically all I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my questions is once you start walking it, do you just kind of does it get repetitive or boring, or is it just sort of constantly changing?
It seems like it would. It definitely gets boring to watch. That's one thing. Everybody like sprints to the line. They're like, somebody's on, let's go look. And then you look and they're just like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it's this big, beautiful landscape, and it is beautiful, but like sometimes a picture like communicates, oh, excitement, shit, look how high that person is, cool. But then you see him walk, it's just a focused, slow walk. But as the person walking across, it's exciting. And so that's kind of one of the things. This will never be something broadcast live on ESPN, at least at length. But every 10 feet of the line, you're in a new environment. So especially, like high lines, you're traveling down across flat, because the line's set.
Yeah.
I've been on lines where you're in the middle, you're well over 300 feet below the anchors because you're
Wow.
traveling way down. And so it's exciting for the person out there and it's cool to watch. But yeah, most of what's interesting is happening in the head and what you're feeling. And yeah, as a spectator sport, it's cool, but
What's the worst case
within
scenario
limits.
that happens though? Like from a safety perspective, I mean, there there's got to be like one thing.
Well, and so that kind of gets into the question, if you were to fall from those heights, there's absolutely zero chance you're going to make it. You know what I mean? Like that's a death fall. And that kind of, yeah, that is kind of the range at which you would designate something a high line, is if it's, but so the way the lines are rigged, when you look at a picture of a high line, you'll see a continuous line and then you'll see one with loops
Yep.
underneath. Those are two strands of webbing, and they're often independently anchored or anchored in a way that's redundant. And then your anchors are always overblown. Every component of that comprises your anchor assembly has a strength rating of at least 4-1 or 5-1 of whatever you'd ever put on it. So the rigging is really important. If your rigging isn't in order, it could absolutely be a lethal activity. And so that's what leads into why part of our motivation for establishing the nonprofit, um, and kind of why we have a culture of inclusion learning, and kind of collective development, is so everybody is constantly reviewing the best rigging methods, all that good stuff. It's not that complicated, but there are things you have to know that make it a really safe activity. But if you are not there, it's really, really unsafe to engage in this activity. So that's something we communicate clearly. And having been in the sport for 10 years plus, all the stupid things that somebody who's new, uh, some the things that they'll probably do that are unwise or unsafe, we did back in the day. So you're never going to be able to completely eliminate those moves. We paid some consequences for those stupid moves back in the day. Thankfully, they weren't too bad. People who are learning will still, but we try to get it out there as much as we can that a community and resources are available if you're interested in this.
Yeah. Just
Which
for
is
like
important
people
because it's
listening that
growing
like don't
fast.
do the sport, like what's the worst situation, or what have you had anything happen or seen anything happen where somebody actually has gotten hurt?
In terms of getting hurt, I mean, sure, injuries do happen.
Nobody
Um,
died in front of you though?
Not, no, there have been several fatalities in the sport, but well, and by and large, they tie back to human error, either in rigging or accessing a line.
What happens though? Is it like, does the line snap or?
So that would be a mainline failure where your walking line, for some reason, either becomes disconnected from the anchor, or if it were to be cut, that would be an instance where you didn't check your abrasion protection well on the anchor, i.e., the webbing was rubbing up against a rock
I know these
that it shouldn't
questions are
have.
like I just I'm
No,
like, I'm sure
completely.
somebody listening is like, what's the worst case scenario here? So the
Yeah.
line gets cut. The what else?
Well, and so if your line were to fail, like that has happened on one of our rigs. It was like a shackle with a screw pin, like a bow shackle, like you'd hook up a trailer with or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The wind was going all night. The webbing was attached here. It was doing like this because the wind was making the line go up and down, and it just unscrewed that shackle pin,
Oh shit.
and one of the anchors blew. But that happened in the middle of the night. And so, but yeah, in terms of people getting hurt, in terms of your slackline rig failing, that could happen if you really missed, if you were just going out there and winging it. If you're following the generally accepted rigging practices now, that's pretty unlikely. Probably the worst injury that I've seen in person was, so you're accessing a line, it leaves from a cliff, slack line going this way. The safe thing to do would be to sit on the line, scoot out, and then do a sitting start
Yeah.
from the line. If you don't know how to do a sit start, which takes a little bit of technique, you might try to step right off the cliff and just walk right out on the slack line. I did that back in the day, and that used to be the most common way to step out onto a high line, because a sit start just wasn't like, when we're talking about innovation of like a sit start, like that's happened within like the last 20, 25 years. And so for the people that didn't know that or haven't learned it yet, they just want to step on out and give it a shot. You're still attached to that leash. So the worst injury that I saw is a dude stepped out from the cliff. His leash was kind of back here. He fell right away because he wasn't, I think it might have been one of his first times on a high line, and he swung back and like smacked his face on the rock and knocked out all his front teeth.
Fuck.
And it's like, dude, that sucks. But even at this point, it's like you had to consider that was a possibility, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Other people, to avoid something like that happening, will step backwards off the cliff and walk out that way. You're seeing less and less of,
Wait, they're going backwards on the line?
Facing the anchor. Yeah, walking back out, not looking this
that's
way.
sketchy.
Yeah.
God damn.
But it's you old school guys and girls that learned long ago, and they just never really picked up the sit start, or they just don't like it. They prefer the old way. They'll still do that and crush it, and it's definitely something you can do, but like be careful, because the possibility for injury then is there to some degree.
Yeah. Did the guy that knocked his teeth out, did he keep going that day?
No, they got him out of there. That was in a pretty remote area.
He just like
was a good sport
finished the line like, oh, got me.
Yeah, he got right off. He was smashed, real smashed up. So injury does happen, but not within the normal course of if you're doing things right, it's a pretty low chance. But if you're new to the sport, definitely get a mentor, get guidance.
Yeah.
Because it'll save you some dumb mistakes.
For you personally, like as a slackliner, what like was the longest crossing you've ever done, and then what was the most fun crossing?
That's a great question. My God, they might be the same line. So the world record for length right now is 2.7 kilometers, 2,700 meters. Pretty badass. In the Midwest here, I have traveled out to California, Colorado, North Carolina, set up some big lines. We haven't gotten into those length ranges. In southern Utah, we set up a 455 meters, something like that, which is around 1,300 feet or something like that. I don't, but that was incredible. So yeah, just the most fun. Yeah, longest line, 460 meters. I could, like it's common for people to rig 1 kilometer these days. Now, granted, that is a huge slack line.
How do you set that up? Like you did one across a lake. How do you even set that line?
The one across the lake, in just a couple weekends, we're setting up a 420 meter that will do the same way. So you tag it. So the first question is, how do you connect your 2 anchor points? There's a number of ways to do that. For the real big lines, we'll use a drone with like 80-pound test fishing line. And so you take off with your drone takes off with a fishing line attached to the bottom. Usually you use like a little carabiner as the weight to hang it down. And then you fly that drone well over a quarter mile away, towing this big fishing line. Sometimes it's, thrusting to get there or whatever. but it always does. And then you land on that side. You replace the fishing line with like a 1/4 inch nylon rope is what we'll do most frequently. And then we'll hook the webbing onto that rope on the far side once we've made that connection, and then use a couple pulleys in progress capture to pull the line across. And then once you have the line across and hooked into the other anchor, the side that it came from, they'll tension it and then fasten that anchor, and boom, your
How long
slack
does that
line's tight.
take?
It completely depends. So a lot of anchors, sometimes it's just a nice flat surface with a big tree, and that's your anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a big tree on both sides. Sometimes the anchor, you're hanging from the side of a wall. You know, you wrap down and it's some bolts, or you're wrapping something, or so. How long the line takes to rig is almost entirely dependent on what the situation is like at both anchors. But a 355 meter, which is like a little over 1,100 feet, and that's, I think, the line you're talking about that was over this big blue, that's actually a mine pit, and it's all groundwater there. So that water is just crystal clear, 300 feet deep, just this huge lake. We set that line up start to finish, like from arrival to we're ready to walk it, in less than 2 hours.
Wow.
That, for sure, that's a really big line to rig that fast. But it's cool that you can do it there. And the reason that's possible is because it's just two giant trees on the top of the hill on either side of this big, beautiful pit.
Where was that? Duluth?
Chisholm.
Where's
Near the Iron Range.
Yeah, I went riding up there once, and they like it's all that like iron ore, copper shit. And
Mm-hmm.
when we rode four wheelers, it bled through all of our clothes. So like we got
Totally.
off and we were like, all of us just looked like you were painted red.
Completely. The iron that's in the ground there, it gets all over your car, clothes. Our
Everything.
dog Bonzer comes, he has a lot of white, he comes back all tan,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's rad, dude. So before we
Dude,
close up on slacklining stuff, if people are interested, you're doing Slackline Minnesota, where can people get, like, two questions. Where can people learn more about this if they want to get into it? And then second, where can people learn more about your nonprofit?
those are two great questions. So for slacklining generally, learning more about slacklining generally, in terms of like a good resource, I would tell them to visit balancecommunity.com.
Okay.
That will be an okay start. It's a retailer, but they have a Slack science blog that goes over how to set up Slack lines. And then, so balancecommunity.com, that's a really good one. And then search the Slacktivity YouTube channel. And these two uh, places online, they'll get you started, and there's a lot more to find after that. But Slacktivity is cool. It's a company. If you just guess how to spell Slacktivity and then put that into Google, it'll get you there. It's a company that does a lot of cool instructional videos with goofy accents. They're from Switzerland, and but they put out good material that doesn't have too much like, hey, we're trying to make money off this YouTube video type vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, this activity YouTube channel, and then balancecommunity.com would be two good places to start.
And then Slackline Minnesota, it's a nonprofit. What are you trying to do, and where can people donate?
Yeah. So the nonprofit exists. You mind if I just talk about it for a quick
Yeah,
second?
absolutely.
So it's a nonprofit that serves the Midwest. So Slackline Minnesota, that kind of includes Wisconsin, Iowa, um, the Dakotas to some degree, but it's kind of this area, definitely Illinois. Um, and the reason it began is because we needed to build the community to accomplish what we were trying to pull off in terms of slack lines we were trying to set up. And so, like, the mission for the organization is really our altruistic, safety, instruction, community building, stewardship. You can get in a lot of trouble if you start setting up slack lines where you're not supposed to. There are some pretty clear boundaries that we've kind of worked out with municipalities over time. Don't rig to a bridge, but if you want to rig over a body of water, as long as your anchors are trees, stuff like that. And so that's the purpose of it. But we needed to build a community to kind of support our own endeavors and ambitions. And so we wanted more slackliners, more people who are stoked. We said we want to introduce this to people. The right type of people will like it. Like if somebody starts to kind of latch on to the activity, they'll generally run with it because it is so awesome. It's just not something that a lot of people know about yet. But the question was, okay, how do we get more people slacklining with us? We thought like, okay, we should do like some boosted Facebook posts or like a boosted Instagram post. And then the next question is like, okay, am I gonna like make an advertisement telling random people to meet me and my friends in the park to get on like this, to practice an activity that has some inherent risk?
Yeah.
And how do you confront the personal liability question in doing that? And so it all kind of, and then and you can't exactly, unless you have somebody sign like your personal waiver, but that's kind of like a half measure. And then as a group, we were having more engagements, getting asked to partner with like big brothers, big sisters, stuff like that. And so eventually we said, okay, we need an entity with some general liability insurance and then the protections that come from operating through a nonprofit corporation as opposed to just us. And so that's kind of how it got started. The activity of the organization is pretty pure in that if you don't hear a lot from it, you can assume that everybody's like connected and busy slacklining.
Yeah.
But what it is in its core is it's basically a website with a way to get in touch with us. We hold weekly Slack jams, which is an opportunity to get on a bunch of different lines. Equipment that would take a long time to acquire yourself. You can try it all out right away. So we're kind of serving our area in that sense while serving our own ambitions to get more capable slackliners in our group so we can do the cool stuff that we want to do.
Fuck yeah.
So we're like ambitious and we have a service ethic.
Can people donate anywhere?
You can, yeah. Slacklineminnesota.org.
Well, I'm glad you're doing all this stuff. It's I am not surprised in any way that this is the type of stuff that you're doing. Like you've never been like a traditional path person and always been like Mark and I met doing music and getting into like, I mean, you said shenanigans. Like we did some pretty wild stuff younger in life. And I asked you like prior to this episode, if you had any good stories. Did you come up with anything or, cause I have a couple, but I wanted to give you a chance to go first.
Well, I mean, I think about, like you posted the Facebook thing that, hey, we're going to do the thing, like your mom was like, oh, sweet. And it got me thinking about your parents a little bit. And, through early high school through high school, I thought about like going to the music festivals, hanging out at different people's houses and stuff. I had a quick flashback to when we were in front of the giant high school that we went to, this high school that accommodates 4,000 students. We're like directly in front of this high school, and your dad pulls up in front of this lady, like kind of swoops up on her in this big car, and he's, do you know where Wayzata High School is? But she's like giving directions, and he keeps looking at her, and he just drives away. I don't know. Hanging out with you, your family, and the crew growing up was just always good vibes.
Yeah, man.
So that's what I thought about a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we did a bunch of pretty ridiculous shit. We went to a Creed concert. I don't know if you remember that, but you and I were, I think, like 13 or 14 at the time, and you were the first person I really started going to concerts with, you and Joe Tombers, and we just wanted to, like, moshing was the thing at concerts for like fucking middle school kids. Like we wanted to mosh or whatever, and Creed was possibly the worst place to
There
be
were
for that.
some, yeah, yeah.
Like,
Well, and we were aspiring music heads too, and we had guidance from your older brother Kyle and his friends. We were musicians. We took music very seriously.
do you remember what Kyle
Uh,
told you about serious music?
like the radio station.
No, like who
Oh,
the
about like what is serious music?
well, like he was a dedicated musician, and like he listens to certain bands that do you remember which band he told you?
No.
I was thinking about this the other day. You were talking to him about, like, you know, the music you like and stuff. He's like, yeah, I like, you know, like serious music, like Good Charlotte. And and you pulled me aside. You're like, your brother just told me that he's very serious about Good Charlotte, and he was dead ass serious too.
It's some serious Good Charlotte music.
Oh my god! But yeah, we're at this Creed concert together, and we had gone to, I don't know what shows. I mean, just like more punk, or just like shows where they actually mosh.
Guttermouth. Did we go to Guttermouth and Pennywise and like?
I think so. Like, that was just the thing, though. We would go to like shows where they fucking mosh, and for some reason we ended up with these tickets to Creed. I think my mom got the tickets and then couldn't go. And it was one of those things where I was like, "Hey man, do you want to go?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's a free concert. Like, I might as well go." And it was so weird. Like, it was a bunch of people, which at this age now, I'm like 30 years old. They didn't seem, or they don't seem that old, but like, I remember we were just the youngest people there, and it was a bunch of people wearing like black, like blouses and fucking like designer type shit. Like, everybody was drinking wine down on the floor, and the music started, and you kept trying to mosh.
Get it going, yeah.
which
Get it up a
like,
little.
you're like getting into people or whatever, and yeah, which is a weird thing to even do, right? Like, to start a mosh requires a certain level of like commitment to the deed, and no one was into it. Like it was me and you were we were starting like, let's mosh or whatever, and you kept running into this heavier woman. And do you remember what she did?
This.
She
Not really.
She eventually she fucking
clocked me pretty good.
Dude, like, you got into her. I don't remember it being that many times. It was like a couple times maybe. And she turned around to you and started screaming. I'm not going to do the voice, but like, she started screaming at you to stop grabbing up on her body.
Oh no.
Yeah, like like you were trying to cop a feel, and I guarantee you, like, there's no way you were trying to cop a feel, like, whatsoever. And you like kind of backed up, and she ended up fucking punching you in the face. I don't know if you remember, like, she hit you square in the face.
I don't.
You don't remember that?
No.
Yeah. So then we ended up, I don't know if I want to tell the back end of this if you don't remember it.
No, by all means.
Like, we were pissed, right? We were at this fucking concert. We didn't like.
Did
we were
like pee in a soda cup and dump it on her shoe or something like that.
I think
that was like some middle school age retribution tactics.
I think we just dumped. We found like the biggest, you know, stadium cup of water, because she hit you, dude. Like, she legit socked the shit out of you. And
Yeah, dude.
and you were pissed, so we schemed, and we all this was in between like running up to random people and be like, show us your boobs, you know, like it's just like that's what you do at every
We
one
were
of those.
conditioned by mass media and what a concert should be, and that's why we just created such a ruckus at this one, man. I
Dude, it was
mean,
like I watched that Woodstock documentary. It was like peak years for that, you know.
ready
So
to get rowdy. It was, yeah. You used to be able to like stomp on people's shins and stuff trying to get to the front. That's less so the case nowadays.
yeah, I don't know
Or I
why.
remember like, yeah, if you're like a crowd surfer runs into you, you're straight up like punching him in the back, like get the fuck out. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't happen at concerts anymore.
no, at
I
least
mean, it
not the ones
does.
we go to.
Yeah.
But I went to Counting Crows at the state fair, by the way. My mom wanted to do that for her birthday, and
This year?
yeah, I was in
That's
Minnesota.
awesome.
That was what I was in town for, but there was none of
Yeah.
there was one guy who was hammered, and he looked like a Limp Bizkit fan, like just like had his shirt, I can't, if it was around his neck or whatever, and he's just like, Long December, like he's just screaming out the hits of Counting Crows song. He was just hammered drunk. I'm like, you're at the wrong concert. This doesn't even make any sense.
That was us.
Yeah,
I remember when we went to the Weezer concert.
that was the first concert I ever went to.
Hell yeah.
It was
Was
good.
it really?
Yeah,
The
it was.
Green Album. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
I think it
And,
was at XL, right?
It was. And I remember we were in the seats for that one and we lit a joint.
We
that
didn't.
Kyle had brought.
We didn't. No,
We didn't. No.
no, we
were
didn't,
too
because you
good
didn't.
for that.
You didn't
Because I
do
wasn't
any of
into
that
it.
stuff. I just remember that was
Yeah.
the first time I ever saw people like smoking. It was all around it, and we kept having to pass it. That was the thing.
That was the thing. But I remember the responsible adults behind us that were like, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Get that out ish.
I think did you
And
go
we were
to
like, this isn't our little joint.
did you go to
Whatever.
Tom Petty with me, or was that Jay?
Oh,
Yeah, some girl
Must've been
came
Jay.
up to him and said she had just put acid in her eye, like had
Oh,
dropped
wow.
through her eyeball. Yeah. But anyway, back to the Crete thing. we went and got like a big stadium cup full of water, and you went up behind her and dumped it on her head, and then we just fucking bolted. But it was just like, oh, my body. She was just covered in wet. Look, this might sound fucked up, but at 13, it was the like greatest. It was the only thing that could be done.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct there. Yeah. 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 The crowd at a Creed concert, I suppose, needs to be messed with to some degree. And
Dude.
it's good that we filled that role. But it also, reflecting on, kind of what we got into as adolescents, it's good stuff. It reinforces my fear of people that age. You do not know what they're gonna do, because all you have to think about is what you were like, and it's horrifying to some degree, but that's also growth and humanity and all that good stuff.
Were you the one that taught me how to play Scruffy?
I don't think so.
Did you ever
I don't
play
know
that?
what Scruffy is. No.
You okay. I just have to like the group of people we like kind of grew up around, at least my group of friends, like all of them in hindsight were fucking crazy. Like it would be parents would go to sleep, we would all get on our bikes and be like out causing
Wreak havoc on the neighborhood.
Yeah, insane
Like,
shit.
just straight up. Yeah, hopefully it wasn't anyone's personal property, but I remember it wasn't like out of the realm of acceptable behavior to just like break random things.
Yeah, no, it was just
What's up with
that was
Yeah.
fun. Like it was, hey, do you want to go out and destroy, like fuck up someone's next week, basically? And one of the games, I don't know who taught me that. I thought it was you, but Scruffy was where you'd get a stuffed animal, squirrel or a raccoon, and attach it to a fishing line. And as a car came, you pull it in front of the car so that they'd slam on their brakes and think they were about to hit an animal. And then they'd get out and realize it was a fucking stuffed animal. And it was just in the suburbs because there's like such a long run and there's so much road. Like it wasn't really a safety issue. It was just fucking with people. Like, and we would do like signing people's yards. Did you ever do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like where you'd go around, you'd go to every fucking political sign you could grab and then fill their entire yard with it.
Yes. And then I remember there was one time you guys were getting into putting like the rubber trash cans just like straight up in the middle of the road. And then every once in a while somebody would run into it. That behavior, although that type of stuff is going to happen with all youth, you know, because you're living within your upbringing. You haven't yet achieved autonomy. I think that type of behavior might have been even amplified amongst people who are in a planned kind of constructed environment, i.e. the suburbs. That's very like unnatural in the sense of like, okay, it's built around the automobile and then there's cops everywhere. And it's just kind of like,
we were way more aware of the cops than like I am now. Like the cops were a constant discussion item, which is
they were on your business all the time.
Yeah, but it's like they were concerned because we were always doing shit that was illegal. Like I don't think about the cops anymore because I'm not like going out in the middle of the night and fucking destroying. Like I knew people
her Fred's backyards.
Dude, there was I talked about this. I don't know which podcast I talked about, but there was a church nearby where we lived that two dudes got drunk and they set it on fire. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. It's fucking crazy, right? Like just getting hammered one night and going and setting a church on fire. Like
I never knew the story behind that, but if that was the cause, I guess. And
dude, those guys are still in prison now. Like, can you imagine making that decision when you were like in high school or something? And then that's what you're in prison for. Like people come, what'd you do? And like,
you would like to think that we exercise some kind of restraint
at
in our
times,
decision making there, but it was probably mostly luck.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm trying to think.
The adolescent male brain is like something to be not necessarily reckoned with, but wary of.
Yeah, and part of that era, right? Like I remember you were the first person to show me Ari Shaffir's YouTube videos. Do you remember those?
Man, I'm not sure.
I mean, The Amazing Racist.
Maybe not. I think I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, where it was like a parody thing, and it was absurdist comedy, and it was like it was so fucking crazy. Like everything that we had, YouTube wasn't out yet. It was all downloaded through like LimeWire and shit like that. So I'd go over to your place and you'd be like, hey, have you seen these fucking crazy videos? And we'd watch them together. But that was like pre-viral. And all of our shit, like CKY.
We were educated by CKY and
Jackass. And those were literally like VHSs that you would have at your I mean, I remember we went over to your place and we watched Monty Python like in your basement on fucking VHS. And that would be it's such a different viewing experience. So when you're doing that, I think there's a propensity to like get together and start scheming like, hey, we should go do this, and this. And it was just a different time. Like everything's on the internet now and everything's so isolated. Like I wanted to talk about the trip to Disney.
Yes.
Because that was like kind of the peak of us messing around. Like, so we were in marching band together. And I actually talked about with Carl when he came on the story of him getting in the picture.
I remember listening to that podcast, and it was a great yes.
So ridiculous. But Mark and I went to fucking, I guess,
the Magical Kingdom, dude, in Florida.
Yeah, is it in Tampa? Or no, it's in
Orlando.
Orlando, that's right.
Yeah.
And like neither one of us, we just wanted to go on a trip, right? Like it wasn't, you're not like a hardcore Disney person, all right? I mean,
no.
It was
the band trip though. You either got to go as a junior or a senior because they went every 2 years.
Yeah. And we had drummed together since we were fucking 13. And so we go on this trip. It's 4 to a room. And I think like the first 2 days of the trip, I was like cool with the trip. By day 5, it's like they had us, because they were all about like getting the most value. They dropped us off at 9 in the morning and picked us up at 9 at night at the parks. And that's a long fucking time to be at a Disney park where it's like, $12 for a drink and all that shit. Like they were long days and they, how many kids went? Like fucking 300 or something?
Yeah, the marching band was mid 300 people.
Yeah. And
quick interjection here. It was a first-rate high school marching band.
Yeah.
Our drumline, we had
it was not bad.
They were good.
But it was me, you, and 2 other guys in a room together. And we're like long fucking days. And every night there was like this very dedicated procedure of you cannot leave your room. Like
they would tape the door.
Well, yeah, they would tape over the door so that if you walked out, it was broken. And the rule was if that tape was broken, everyone in the room was headed home. Like it was on the first flight home. It was a 0 tolerance policy. And we started hearing about this policy a week before like we even signed up to go on the trip. Like it was, how many times do you think they told us about this policy? Like 50 fucking times or something?
Many. And the precursor to this was we were like, okay, I think the precursor to interpreting this rule was when I had already gotten Saturday school for chewing gum in band. As a percussionist, I understand the rule. For one violation, did I deserve Saturday school? Probably not.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was within that context of rule enforcement where we were starting to say, how much is this making sense? But anyway,
it seemed excessive.
Yeah.
But so they start telling us about the rule before we even start the trip. We go on the trip. Every fucking meeting that we have with 300 people, you cannot leave your room. You cannot leave your room. Every morning, like we're reminded of that. And then every night they do these checks where each fucking teacher or chaperone or whatever would come to the room, do a body count, and then remind us all that like, if you are in the room and you need to leave the room, you cannot leave the room. You need to call the front desk and they will call the teacher and he will come to the room and get you. And it was fucking every night the same reminder. The guy came in and we just sat there and we listened to it. And it must have been night 6. The youngest teacher, the guy that was like fucking teacher in training, first year or whatever, just dweeby guy with like red hair and glasses. He comes in and we're sitting there and we're like, he's going over this speech and all of us are just zoned out. And Mark gets this look in his eye. And do you remember what his name was? The teacher?
I do, but I don't know if we should say it on a podcast.
Just what's his first letter?
Scott.
No, it was a different guy than that. It was a redheaded guy. It was his first.
Oh no, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was like Mr. D or whatever, we'll just say. And he's sitting there, he's going through his fucking notes and telling us whatever. And he's like, do not leave the room. If you need to leave the room, you need to call the front desk, and the front desk will call the teacher's room, and he will come and get you. And we're in a room of 4 people, and Mark just shoots his hand up in the air with a question. And the teacher's like, what? We're in a room. Like, why are you raising your hand, Mark? You don't need to just ask me the question. And he goes, question. If I really need to go number 1 and Adam's in the bathroom going number 2, should I A, leave the room and go to the bathroom in the lobby, or B, have Adam spread his legs and me aim in between him?
Yeah. Well, and I think so. I mean, this is just a precursor to my like innovative problem solving oriented mind. But I think the real approach there would have been to actually straddle you and then throw a hand down and just aim straight down.
Yeah. I don't know if you went to that level of detail, but this guy, he was like the 9th grade band teacher who was in his first year on day like 6 of doing like hundreds of these announcements.
Of almost 400 kids at Disneyland.
Yeah, and he's just like eating shit for just like a full week on like the longest trip ever. He just looks at you, looks at all of us. He's like, Mark, do not leave this room. But seeing an adult have to, like, you phrased it in such a perfect way that you said all of those ridiculous things, but he couldn't get angry at you. Like, it was essentially like doing clean comedy. Like, you said something absolutely ridiculous. Oh my God. That was so funny, man. But I don't know where to end necessarily after that. That was the last like story I had for you. Anything else come to mind for you?
Oh man. Well, I mean, yeah, you think about yeah, all the good people that we went to school with, and even that yeah, like new band teacher, whatever he was. He was like the 3rd, and then there were 2 more for like such a big band program. Even like after school, I think I've ran into him at least once or twice. And running into him as an adult, it kind of brings it introduces a new context where he's just like a hilarious dude. I mean, most people, and especially once you get out of that like weird, like you're within this like system as a student sort of context, you realize that everybody is cool. Everybody has a sense of humor. And if somebody's a little bit like, off or not quite on the same wavelength as you are, you can start to appreciate that once the like power dynamic, but more just the obligatory, like I'm sure he was as sick of the structure we were existing within as we were, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think deep down he appreciated those stupid little
Oh, for sure. He had
jokes.
to. But it still is it is weird when you get out of that situation. You're like, wait a second, like this was the only place that person in their life had that power. Like everywhere else, they were getting shit on by society, by like everyone around them. Like this was all they had. It's terrible. Oh, well, dude, I really appreciate the time. It's great to talk with you. Next time I'm in Minnesota, I would love to like just come and like watch you do some of the slackline stuff, maybe hop on if I have the courage to do so. And I learned a lot about it. I definitely think some people probably got something out of it. One last time, where can people find your stuff?
So slacklineminnesota.org, but I would imagine because a lot of our friends might listen to this too. The local slackline group here in Minnesota is called MinSlack, and it's very closely link to the nonprofit Slackline Minnesota.
Okay.
So if you search on Facebook, just MINN, like Minnesota, but cut it off there, Min, and then SLACK. A group for the Twin Cities, and then kind of the area around the Midwest where a lot of like communication happens. And you can find out where the meetups are, and those are all really catered towards folks who want to get started. So Min Slack in the Midwest, but if you're near any larger city at this point, there should generally be a local Slackline community with a Facebook group. Honestly, you can do a bunch of research online, check into it, kind of be like, oh, I want to start slacklining, get inspired that way. But then the real way to start enjoying it without a whole bunch of confusion and struggle yourself is to meet up with people that have already kind of gone through those things. And usually the people that are instructing you were also shown at one point. So that's just very much the culture of instruction.
Hell yeah, man. Well,
Yeah.
we got to get you back on with just some of our longtime buddies so we can talk about some more of these shenanigans. But I really appreciate the time. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button, throw a comment in for Mark or myself, and then hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. If you're listening to us just on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download podcasts, make sure to hit that rate and review button. Give us a 5-star review. Throw a comment in there. All that stuff helps us quite a bit. And as always, follow us on Instagram at FNFPod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool. 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 Welcome to my wave pool.